Let's face it, the original Power Rangers movie from the 90s wasn't exactly what we all had in mind. Sure, it felt good at the time, but it certainly hasn't aged well, and if I was a 7-year-old today, I'd probably think it was just ridiculous. But for me, it will always have somewhat of a timeless quality, and certainly the TV show will never age in my eyes. But in 2017, we got a complete reboot that ditches everything from the 90s and starts over again from scratch. Now, normally I wouldn't do a whole video on this, as everyone was getting in on the nostalgia train when the movie first came out, but it's only when I learned that there's already a sequel that exists in the form of a graphic novel that I decided to throw my hat in the ring. So, here we go. We start with a vision of Earth's past in the Cenozoic era, which for paleontology buffs is the period between when dinosaurs went extinct and now, and also where you would find some of the creatures that formed the Zords we knew from the TV show, like the Tyrannosaurus and the Mastodon. Actually, it's the transition from the Cretaceous era into the Cenozoic era that is thought to be roughly the period in which dinosaurs went extinct, that theory being based on when it's thought that a catastrophic event like a meteor hit, which is actually an important point to bear in mind, which you'll realise in a sec. We see an injured Red Ranger as there appears to be a mix of natural disasters and warfare raging in the background. He crawls to the aid of a dying Yellow Ranger, who in this version is clearly not human. The Red Ranger calls to Alpha, who we can assume is the same Alpha from the TV show, and tells him that he is the last one left alive, and also to send a meteor to his location. See what I mean? Meteor strike. Stick with me. The Red Ranger demorphs and appears to cast power coins into the ground. He's approached by the Green Ranger, who makes reference to the Zeo Crystal. If you're familiar with the TV show or my previous videos, then you'll know that in that version the Zeo Crystal is a form of great power that is used to transition from the Mighty Morphin era into the Zeo era. It is here that we learn that these characters are Rita and Zordon. The meteor hits and launches Rita into the ocean, where she loses her power coin. Then we see a dying Zordon and what is presumably the Zeo Crystal. I don't remember any mention of Zordon being the previous Red Ranger in the TV show, although Zordon's entrapment in a Time Warp was the result of his battle with Rita, and while there was also no mention of Rita being the Green Ranger, she was obviously in possession of the Green Power Coin, as she was able to corrupt Tommy into becoming an evil form of the Green Power Ranger, so it's possible that this could be an origin from the TV version as well, although obviously we know the origins of the Super Sentai versions, but that's another video. We then switch to modern day and the strange placement of a bull masturbation joke. Don't ask, it's not important. This is supposedly our Jason character, and rather than the wholesome martial arts instructor from the TV show, this one has immediately been dropped into a car chase with the police. Cue the inevitable car crash, the screen goes black, and we transition to the start of the movie proper. Jason has supposedly just thrown away the chance at a football scholarship and has been condemned to year-long Saturday detentions with a bunch of other juvenile delinquents. And yet there's some good in him as he slaps down the bully that is picking on some of the weaker members of this ragtag group of ruffians. The obligatory hot girl of the group, which we soon learn is Kimberly, makes her way to the ladies' room to meet some of her friends, only to find out that she's actually being kicked out of the group due to some misunderstanding with a photo being sent to a boy, and the missing tooth he suffered as a result. As an act of rebellion, and also to hide the fact that she's upset, she takes a pair of scissors to her hair and inexplicably ends up looking hotter. So, standard teenage movie stuff here then. The autistic geek of the group, or Billy, makes friends with Jason to thank him for dealing with the bully. He then asks him to help him out with something, although we don't know what yet, or why. And Jason initially refuses due to a sheriff's department tag on his ankle, but thanks to some domestic arguments at home, he decides to take Billy up on his offer and heads to his house, only with the promise that Billy can hack into the tag on his ankle to trick it into thinking he's actually home. Presumably the sheriff's department is stupid enough to think that the jump between Billy's house and Jason's house on the GPS is perfectly doable in a matter of seconds, but hey, it's a movie. Jason drives Billy to a gold mine, but decides rather than helping, he'd rather just be a dick and leave him there. But it's okay, because it turns out plenty of Angel Grove's teenagers hang out at this active mine with explosives everywhere. Before leaving, Jason catches sight of Kimberly diving into a lake, and the two exchange flirtatious quips. Because, you know, she's hot. Anyway, Billy is getting far too busy with some explosives that clearly teenagers in this town are allowed to buy, and ends up nearly blowing himself to pieces. The group of young'uns all run to Billy's aid, only to find out that he's actually caused an entire shelf of rock to fall away and reveals some sort of giant crystal that contains things that look like power coins buried by Zordon millions of years ago. Security finally get wise to the teenagers being there and enter into one of the weirdest car chases you've ever seen, which then ends in a classic movie cliche of a race to a train crossing, only the car loses and gets slammed into oblivion. By sheer coincidence, just as the power coins are being discovered, Jason's dad, who is apparently a fisherman, just happens to discover Rita's watery grave. After 65 million years at sea, she apparently never got buried or eaten. She was just floating around with the fish, not being bothered by anyone. The crew lower her into a refrigeration bay, but oh no, bad news, she actually has her power coin clasped in her wrinkly, non-decomposed hand too. We cut to Jason in bed at home, apparently not knowing how he got there or how they escaped the crash. His knee is also suddenly better after injuring it in the previous crash, and he's still in possession of his power coin. The teenagers begin to realise that not only are they fine, but they have also acquired super strength, as Billy's even able to handle his own former bully. When the police arrive at the marina to investigate the body that the fisherman found, Rita writhes back into life and attacks the officer. The teenagers then return to the gold mine, which has no apparent step up in security, and attempt to tie down the other two, one being a character that we now know is called Zach. They begin an over-the-top chase scene before a literal leap of faith to confirm their new friendship. Seriously, how many cliched movie tropes can you fit in the first half an hour? Billy falls over the ledge but is unharmed and calls down for the others to jump. Kimberly grabs the new girl, which we learn is called Trini, or Trini in this version, and they all land in a pool below the ledge. They begin to glow in their respective colours and swim down to find a second upside-down surface, which they then fall through, and find a secret bunker of some kind that closely resembles the spaceship that we saw crashing at the start of the film, only it's merged with the rock, seeing as it's been there for so long. The power coins begin to glow again, opening the door. They all enter and we get our first glimpse of the movie form Alpha 5. Which apparently stands for Almorphic Lorcade Persona Android, which makes no sense whatsoever, because why would his name be an English language acronym when English didn't exist when the ship was buried? Zordon has to tap into information that Alpha has since stored in the ship's matrix sometime in the last 65 million years in order to communicate with the Rangers. So why on Earth, or any other planet, would Alpha have a name in English? Anyway, Alpha tells them that they've been waiting for that magical 65 million years for their coming, and ushers them into the command centre to be introduced to Zordon, who has survived only as his consciousness was also sealed in the ship's matrix. Although special kudos to the writers for the meta-joke that refers to the old Black Ranger joke, etc. Zordon and Alpha explain that seeing as the coins have chosen their new hosts, and the morphing grid has allowed them access to the ship, then the teenagers must be the new Power Rangers. It turns out that all planets that contain life also contain a piece of the Zeo crystal. Zordon's team died defending the crystal, and the new Rangers are now its protector, along with all life on Earth, which is pretty convenient seeing as the one person who was an immediate threat just happened to come back to life a couple of days ago. The Rangers are given a vision of what may happen if Rita was allowed to return, which she has already started to do. She will resurrect Goldar and rip the crystal from the inside of the Earth, so that she can have the power to create and destroy worlds. Similar to the TV show, the Rangers don't accept what has happened to them initially and then decide to leave. Jason is left to be the one that returns them to the command centre. Meanwhile, Rita is regaining her strength, feeding off fish and gathering of gold, which she'll need to make Goldar. But for now she's just settling for the teeth of homeless people rather than just heading to the gold mine. The Rangers return to the command centre and enter into a long, drawn-out excuse for a montage that sees them going through training against simulated rockmen, or putties, see what they did there, and also learning how to morph. At the same time, Billy has tracked down the location of the Zeo crystal, which is apparently buried below a Krispy Kreme. Now there is a movie product placement tie-in, but seriously, who eats a donut with a fork? Seeing as the Rangers are struggling to become the armoured versions of themselves they need to be, Alpha decides to give them a bit of inspiration by showing them the Zords. And they look... Ugh. Honestly, the 90s rubber suit versions were still better looking. Either way, the Rangers continue their training. With tempers flaring, Billy becomes the first to morph, although it doesn't last very long. Zordon gets fed up and wants to try and return himself, all the while Rita continues to gather gold so that she can regain enough power to unearth her putties and, eventually, Goldar. Thanks to some teenage angst and the realisation that all the Rangers are as flawed as each other, they're able to tap into the camaraderie that they'll need to morph later. However, Rita confronts Trini and threatens to kill her if she doesn't help her find the Zeo crystal. Trini tells the other Rangers her plan, but it doesn't help much as they go after her anyway, despite not being able to morph yet. Rita captures them and attempts to torture them into giving her the location of the Zeo crystal. Billy succumbs, telling her where it is, and is drowned before being dragged back to the command centre. The realisation that they would have all given their lives for each other sparks the morphing grid into life, allowing Zordon to step through and live again, only he doesn't, instead sacrificing himself for Billy and confirming Jason as the only Red Ranger and the leader of the Power Rangers. The Rangers step up and boom, it's morphin' time. And the suits, oh god, I mean just look at them. Having learnt the location of the Zeo crystal under Krispy Kreme, Rita heads off to finally bring Goldar back to life, who predictably looks like crap, as well as also sending in a bunch of putties to deal with the newly morphed Rangers. Not that she really knew whether they were still alive or that they'd even managed to morph, but, you know, belts and braces. The Rangers enter the Zords and then, wait for it, after 1 hour, 34 minutes and 36 seconds, we finally get to hear the iconic Power Rangers theme tune. And they butcher it. Just play it. I mean, it. Rita and Goldar get to work on Angel Grove, heading for the Krispy Kreme, while the Rangers battle a barrage of putties in the Zords. And I'm just going to stop you there for a second, because can we just take a second to appreciate this piece of product placement marketing? We have Rita Repulsa sat in a Krispy Kreme eating a donut. The battle rages on, and Jason gets a chance to save his dad from, what else but a car crash. Can you add irony to the movie trope cliché list? Cool. The Zords line up for a standoff with Goldar, but when pushed into a pit, they emerge like something out of a Michael Bay wet dream with huge explosions and the newly formed Megazord, which, again, looks like crap. Rita fuses with Goldar, but emerges once again when Megazord does away with him for good. She attempts to attack Megazord, but gets swatted into space like a fly. It appears the Rangers have won, and oh hey, it's the guys we wish we'd got instead. That's kind of a tease. The Rangers go back to their normal lives and the movie ends. But there is an after-credits scene that teases a sequel, as back in detention a teacher is taking a register and calls out Tommy Oliver. There's then a slow zoom to a green jacket and the hallway explodes. I've got to admit, this isn't the worst adaptation that we could have got, but this movie certainly isn't what many of us wanted, and it's mostly down to stylisation choices. Elizabeth Banks is actually really good, but not her, not Goldar, not the Zords, and certainly not the Rangers look like they should do. I understand that you have to update the spandex suits, the rubber suit monsters, and the 90s attitude, but it just doesn't feel right. Although granted, these are actually teenagers with attitude as opposed to the wholesome, clean-cut Rangers we got from the TV show. But if the old-style Rangers can hold up today in the comic books, then there's no need to go for such a dramatic overhaul. However, I do like that there's a specific reason that Rita is targeting Angel Grove. In the TV show, she just wants to take over the Earth, with no specific reason for targeting a small American city. If anything, it's being incredibly courteous of her to keep sending her monsters to where the Power Rangers live. In the movie, she's obviously targeting Angel Grove because that's where the Zeo crystal is, and that's also where Goldar is buried. The deleted scenes don't add much to the story, but you do get a better sense of Jason's relationship with his dad and how his ruined knee and the subsequent lost football scholarships have torn them apart. Although, seeing as his knee is now fine, does that mean that he can now play football again? Anyway, we also get a glimpse at how some of the scenes are created, as nobody seems to do a decent behind-the-scenes documentary on DVDs anymore. Oh, and Jason and Kimberly actually do more than just flirt. They actually start to get down to business before Trini's text interrupts them. But, dear friends, this is not where the story ends, because while there is a second movie teased in a post-credits scene, there is already a sequel in the form of a graphic novel, and so we move on to Power Rangers Aftershock. The comic starts off 1 week after what it calls the encounter, and many of the displaced people of Angel Grove are recovering in a refugee camp. A woman called Melanie Shear turns up with humanitarian aid, but is not all what it seems when her and her team begin to work on something that is other than just aid. Meanwhile, the Rangers have been left with cleanup duty. The Goldar dust has reactivated some of the fallen putty patrollers, and while Rita and Goldar are no longer, the threat hasn't completely gone away. But Jason appears to be struggling as the new leader, and while he initially questions why Zordon has his doubts, a series of bad decisions and mistakes by other Rangers has him doing the same. But Zordon needs Jason to step up, as even though Rita is gone, the return of the Power Rangers puts a target on Earth. On the other side of town, 2 escaped prisoners are hiding out in an abandoned sawmill. While exploring, the man is dragged away, presumably to his doom, but we learn more of that later. Back with the Rangers, and Zack is struggling with the fact that he potentially caused an accident, while Jason and Kimberly are carrying on with the developing love affair that we saw in the film. Only an explosion in Angel Grove interrupts them, and the Rangers have to morph to investigate. It turns out that the explosion was caused by the escaped prisoners, the guy now looking a bit more enhanced than he did before, and we also learn that these are brother and sister. A battle ensues between the Rangers and our new bulbous friend, while his sister goes off in search of something. Throughout the battle, the brother mentions memories that aren't his, suggesting that he was once 40 foot tall and remembers fighting the Rangers. Meanwhile, the sister has found what she's looking for, only it appears that she wants to become like her brother, but for some reason it doesn't work, leaving the ensuing battle with the Rangers a bit pointless, so the two flee. Back at the command centre, and Zordon informs the Rangers that not only is the Guldar dust affecting the rise of more putty patrollers, but the reactive gold alloy keeps his consciousness and the drive for the Zeo crystal alive. This is now seemingly merged with our siblings, who we learn are called Jacob and Audrey Hogan. Their father died in the same mining accident that claimed Billy's dad, only they were left to fend for themselves and turned to a life of crime. At the same time, our supposed humanitarian worker has her men searching for something related to Guldar and the putties. They find an unidentified hand, which we don't know anything about yet, but it seems to make Miss Shear very happy indeed. Back at the sawmill, the Hogans are trying to figure out what went wrong with Audrey's attempts to becoming fused with the Guldar dust. Turns out all that was needed was a little jumpstart, and the two emerge as part of the same symbiote. Jason attempts to confront the other Rangers in regards to his leadership. He tells them that he's struggling with the idea and he needs them to remain a team if this is going to work. But before they really get anywhere, Alpha calls the Rangers back to the command centre to brief them on a monster that has appeared in Angel Grove. A monster that we haven't seen before, but one that is big enough to require the Rangers to enter their Zords before going into battle. Although that's not of any particular use, as the Zords proceed to get their arses handed to them by this new giant. Trini pushes Jason to be the leader he's supposed to be, and Jason's brilliant idea is to come together to form Megazord. In an ending typical of the 90s TV show, one swoop of the sword and the monster is downed. Only it appears that Jacob and Audrey were inside the monster, controlling its actions. When they refuse to surrender and go quietly, the Rangers electrocute them, obviously, which doesn't kill them but does solidify them. Miss Shear appears to offer their medical facilities as storage, only the police chief isn't stupid enough to not realise that she isn't all that she says she is, and sends them packing. Only more pieces of Guldar dust and putty start appearing, and the Rangers are sent to investigate. Although we've seen this hand before, and it is in fact a trap set to track down the Rangers in person. Miss Shear reappears and informs them that she's working for the US government, and while they appreciate that the Rangers saved the Earth from Rita and Guldar, they don't trust the Rangers or the great power that they possess. While they don't pose an immediate threat, the government are keeping an eye on the Rangers' activity, but in the meantime, she's got some investigating to do with the Hogans. Okay, so it's a bit of a nothing storyline, but it potentially sets up a comic book universe that uses the movie as the origin story. This could sit alongside that of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series by Boom Comics. It's also quite nice to see what happens after the credits roll. So often with the TV show, the town is destroyed only for it to be fine again the next week. We also get a bit more context as to how Billy's dad dies and why he has such good knowledge of the mines. But in the end, nobody's going to look to the 2017 reboot of Power Rangers as the start of a new craze. It doesn't have the charm of the original, and while the 90s version does look a bit low rent in comparison by today's standards, the comic book series is breathing new life into the franchise that kind of eclipses anything that this version is doing. But that's for another video. Was that everything? I think I said everything. Hang on, wait. The actress that plays Kimberly, is she British? Excuse me.